Rows of suits shifted, shoes scuffed, and somewhere behind me, my family hissed the same two words they had sharpened on my name for decades. Dropout. Addict. The syllables rode the wood-paneled walls and died at my back. The fluorescent lights in the federal courtroom buzzed like trapped hornets. Pine polish and cold metal braided into a smell I'd known since the first time I watched a gavel fall on someone who thought they were untouchable. The gallery rustled, a low tide of curiosity and disdain. I kept Grandma Rosa's rosary coiled in my palm, the beads pressing small moons into my skin. The Marshal's badge at my hip was heavier than it looked. I did not touch it. I didn't need to. I knew what I was. The clerk called the case. The judge entered, robes whispering. A bailiff's voice unspooled the ritual. "All rise!" And the room obeyed. When we sat, the whispers tried again, thinner now, like a habit that had lost its breath. Uncle Anthony stared straight ahead at the defense table, jaw set, tie the same thick navy he wore to christen bulldozers and buy inspectors. My cousin Marcus leaned back as far as the chair would allow, lounging as if a RICO indictment were a minor inconvenience. My mother fixed her eyes on the judge. Not on me, never on me. The same way she had looked past me at 19, across a kitchen slick with lies. The prosecutor, hair neat, eyes unblinking, rose with a file in her hand that had lived under my mattress in pieces for years. She didn't turn to the jury first. She turned to me. "The court calls Deputy U.S. Marshal Elena Ward." For a heartbeat, time rung hollow, like a bell struck in an empty church. Then the word hit, "Deputy," and the room took it in like a gasp. Chairs creaked, a cough caught. Somewhere to my left, my mother's breath stuttered. My uncle's hand tightened on a legal pad until the paper bent. Marcus stopped lounging. I stood. My badge flashed once in the recessed lighting. I closed my fingers over the rosary so the crucifix wouldn't clink, and stepped into the aisle. The aisle felt narrower than it had during walkthroughs, but fear didn't live there anymore, only purpose. I passed the pew where my family sat and felt their gaze like weather. No one spoke, not even them. At the rail, the bailiff lifted a palm. I raised my right hand. The oath came easy. Words I'd said in courthouses, safe houses, and parking lots that smelled of hot asphalt and danger. "Do you swear?" "I do." I took the stand. The wood was cool under my fingertips. The microphone breathed a faint static, as if the room were leaning closer to hear the truth it had been denied for 23 years. The prosecutor approached, her voice clean. "Deputy Ward, would you please state your name and occupation for the record?" I looked past her shoulder, past the seal, past the gallery that had once watched me vanish, and let the truth take its first full step into daylight. "Elena Ward," I said. "Deputy United States Marshal." The gavel hadn't fallen yet. It didn't need to. The sound that mattered was already in the room. The sound of a story breaking open where everyone could see it. They like to tell the story as if it started when I dropped out of college. That's the version they sold. Elena couldn't hack it. She was soft. She was using. But the truth started before the dropout. It started at the kitchen table. I was 19, perched on a chair that felt too large, too polished. Uncle Anthony tapped his glass. Marcus smirked, and my mother sat across from me with her arms folded so tight her knuckles whitened. I asked the question anyway. Why did Miguel's harness snap? The silence was sharp. Anthony didn't look up. Cheap gear. Heat rushed through my chest. It wasn't just an accident. The site was out of code. Somebody signed off. Marcus laughed, dismissive. Hear that? Elena thinks she's OSHA now. Enough, my mother snapped. I turned to her. I needed her to see me, to stand with me, just once. But her face stayed locked, hard. For a fleeting instant, her lips trembled, like the truth had pressed against them, desperate to be spoken. But she swallowed it, folding her arms tighter. Anthony leaned back, grin lazy but words sharp. You're too soft, kid. Not cut out for this business. You care too much. The words landed like a gavel. My hands shook under the table. I dug my nails into the wood until the sting steadied me. For the first time, I wondered if my family's bloodline was thicker than my own breath. Late nights, I hovered by the kitchen door while Anthony and Marcus drank. Their voices slurred into laughter about inspectors bought cheap, ledgers massaged. Then came the betting. 200 says he doesn't last the week. A pause. Another laugh. Nah, he's steady. 50 he'll limp through. My stomach dropped. For a moment I thought I'd misheard, until Marcus slapped down a slip. Names, odds. Scribbles that mocked life itself. My chest seized. I saw Miguel falling again, the snap of rope, the silence after. And now I pictured faceless workers standing on scaffolds that doubled as roulette tables. I pressed the rosary into my palm until the crucifix dug blood. Is this still family? Or a crime family? The next day, I shoved one of the slips into my mother's hands. My voice cracked. They're betting on deaths. Look at it. Her eyes flicked down. Her hand shook, just a little, as if something inside her recoiled. For a second, I thought she might fold me into her arms, but the second passed. She stuffed the slip deep into a laundry basket. That's men talking. Don't meddle. Mom, please. Her voice cut low, like a whisper honed into a knife. Do you want to destroy this family? Is that what you want? The air left my lungs because I saw it, she knew. And still she chose silence, not because she didn't love me, but because her loyalty to the Ward name was stronger than her love. I walked out shaking, the rosary clutched so hard my palm ached. Only Rosa gave me something else. You care too much, she whispered, pressing the rosary into my hand. Don't let them take that away. When she died, the last true ally vanished. My mother's grief was real, but it didn't last. Anthony talked taxes. Marcus cracked jokes. I kept the rosary. I kept her words. The fireworks split the night. Laughter and smoke tangled. I couldn't hold it anymore. Do you even care? Men are dying on your sites. Anthony turned, grin slicing. You'll never make it out there. Too soft. You'll crawl back, begging. That's if you're not strung out first. Marcus raised his beer. To rehab! Their laughter drowned the fireworks. My throat burned. Eyes stung. My mother glanced at me then, her face pale, lips trembling. She looked almost ready to speak, but Anthony's laughter smothered it, and she looked away. I pressed the rosary until the crucifix cut my skin. For the first time, I knew. They would never see me as anything but the family's scapegoat. So I left, quietly, without suitcases or farewells. They thought their lies had buried me, but all they did was carve me sharp enough to break free. I left home under the shadow of lies. Rehab, dropout, failure. Those were the stories my family scattered behind me like breadcrumbs. I didn't fight them. For the first time, their whispers became a weapon I could use. If they wanted the world to believe I'd disappeared into addiction, let them. Disappearance was exactly what I needed. The federal building where I began smelled like paper left too long in a drawer. The intake officer glanced at my file, at my name, at me. His eyes paused, not on my record, which was blank, but on my surname, Ward. For a second, I thought he would ask the question, tie me back to the empire I was trying to sever. Instead, he just stamped the corner and slid it back. That night, in the narrow cot of a shared dorm, I lay awake, gripping Grandma Rosa's rosary in my palm, repeating to myself, too soft? Prove it. Too weak? Prove it. The first run nearly broke me. My lungs clawed for air, my legs screamed, and sweat blurred my vision. I wanted to stop, but stopping would mean proving them right. So I didn't. I pushed until my chest burned with something new. Defiance shaped into endurance. Training remade me. Push-ups carved discipline into my arms. Case law carved logic into my brain. On the range, my hands steadied until the pistol's kick felt like punctuation, not chaos. Each day, I shed a layer of the girl who once sat trembling at a kitchen table. At night, though, she came back. I would press the rosary to my lips and feel the old shame echo. Anthony's grin, Marcus's laughter, my mother's folded arms. The pain never disappeared. It hardened, became a reminder. I whispered Grandma's words, "Don't let them take caring from you." And I turned it into fuel. One morning, after a marksmanship drill that left my shoulder bruised, a woman waited outside the range. She wore civilian clothes but moved with the unhurried purpose of someone who commanded more than rank. "Sophia Martinez," she said. Her handshake was dry, firm. "FBI." I didn't ask what she wanted. People like her never showed up without a reason. "Your ward," she said flatly. "Riverside." I stiffened. "I am." "Construction ward." "For now." Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "We've looked at them before. Nothing stuck. You want to make this academic? Finish the academy and move on. You want to make it field? Maybe we talk field." I knew what that meant. Dirt, danger, and days where silence was survival. My pulse raced, but my voice stayed steady. Field. That was the first step into a plan that would swallow years. The lie of rehab became my shield. Sophia and the Bureau built scaffolding around it. Part-time jobs under false names, burner phones, couches that became temporary homes. On paper, I was a woman who had failed, drifted, and vanished. It felt strange, at first, to lean on the very slander that had broken me. Each time someone nodded knowingly, "Ward's girl? Yeah, heard she's in treatment." I swallowed the sting and reminded myself, every rumor made my cover stronger. But inside, I carried truth. Every mile I ran, every statute I memorized, every target I hit, each was a secret rebellion against the story they wrote for me. My first day back on a ward site came at dawn. Men shuffled in coats too thin, waiting for their numbers to be called by a labor broker with nicotine-stained fingers. I blended in, a face among the tired, the desperate. We climbed into a pickup bed, rattling toward a half-built site. The foreman tossed hard hats with cracks like spider webs, gloves with fingers worn thin. He called me sweetheart, like it was a reflex. I said nothing. I learned instead. Where the cash was counted, Which trailer held the ledgers? Which men muttered about injuries that were never reported? That night, in a motel that smelled of mildew, I wrote my first report. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the weight of proof finally shifting into my grip. Sophia's reply came by encrypted channel. Good. Corroboration, not conclusions. Keep building. 3 months in, I almost blew my cover. A site manager handed me a black trash bag, told me to dump it at the edge of the lot. It sagged heavy in my hands. Too heavy for paper, too light for debris. My gut twisted. I slid it open in the alley. Betting slips spilled out, ink smudged, names scrawled, odds written like jokes. My heart slammed so hard my ears roared. For a second, I thought I'd faint. A truck backfired. I flinched, breath catching, convinced I'd been caught. But no one came. I tied the bag tight, tossed it, and walked back with a face as blank as concrete. In the bathroom of a dive bar that night, I spread the slips on a cracked sink, photographing each with hands that shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. One slip carried my thumbprint. I tore it, flushed it, cursing myself for carelessness. When I reported it, Sophia's voice came sharp over the secure line. You're not a martyr, Elena. Paper doesn't forget. Stay with paper. Her anger wasn't disappointment, it was protection. And in it, I felt a strange echo of Grandma's warning. Don't let them take caring from you. The years blurred. Pickups at dawn, pay in cash envelopes, ledgers tucked under clipboards. I documented everything. Shell companies, ghost payrolls, inspectors on take. The family's story, that I was in treatment, spread so easily I sometimes wondered if my mother actually believed it. Once, I overheard her at a grocery store, voice low. Elena? She's struggling, but we're hopeful. Her tone carried something almost tender, and for a breath, I felt like a daughter again. Then I remembered the slip of paper she had stuffed into the laundry basket, and the tenderness curdled. I let them keep their illusions. Better a ghost than a liability. The decision to testify came in a windowless room under bad lighting. A USA slid a folder across the table. My years of reports stacked neat. Betting slips, payrolls, contracts. You can be a sealed witness, one said, or you can take the stand. Sophia didn't look at me when she spoke. If you testify, they can't dismiss you as rumor. They'll have to look you in the eye. My stomach clenched. I thought of Anthony's grin, Marcus's toasts, my mother's silence. For a moment, 19-year-old me sat at that kitchen table again, hands sweating, heart racing. Then I remembered Grandma's rosary, caring too much. I'll testify, I said. The lie of rehab had hidden me long enough. Now the truth would step into daylight, and this time, I wouldn't flinch. 3 years isn't a long time on paper, but inside it stretched like a life lived twice. I measured it not in birthdays or holidays, but in reports filed, evidence logged, and the rosary beads I wore thin between my fingers in motel rooms that smelled of bleach and rust. Day after day, I blended in with crews that didn't know my name. We piled into the backs of trucks at 4 a.m, tools rattling, breath steaming in the dark. Nobody asked questions. You don't ask questions when a day's pay depends on silence. On site, I learned to move like I belonged, keeping my head down, shoulders loose, eyes busy without looking busy. I wasn't there to build walls. I was there to take them down. The Empire's corruption wasn't subtle. Envelopes passed hand to hand, timesheets forged with a pen stroke, inspectors invited for lunch, leaving with envelopes thicker than their appetites. The trick wasn't seeing it. The trick was holding it in my hands without letting them notice. The ugliest truth was the ritual. Betting slips passed like cigarettes in back rooms, scribbled odds on who would fall, who would limp, who would bleed. They laughed about it, Marcus loudest of all. He wasn't just participating, he was performing. Every chuckle, every slap on the back was a way to prove himself worthy of inheriting Anthony's empire. Sometimes I caught Anthony's eyes on him, proud and calculating, as if Marcus's cruelty was proof that the business would survive. Watching them was like watching a crown pass down, only this crown was forged from broken bones and bloodied scaffolds. Each time I saw a slip change hands, bile rose in my throat. My palms would sweat around the wire hidden in my jacket, and I'd remind myself, breathe, record, endure. I learned to document with precision. A ledger page wasn't just ink, it was a map. A shell company wasn't just a name, it was a funnel. I collected receipts, payroll logs, backdated safety forms. I photographed slips against rulers for scale, logged chain of custody in handwriting neat enough to survive cross-examination. At night, in another anonymous room, I would spread the evidence across a table like puzzle pieces. Sometimes it felt endless. Sometimes it felt like drowning. But each piece brought me closer to the surface. Sophia reminded me constantly, paper is king. Don't chase ghosts, don't chase confessions. Bring me records. So I did. There were moments when the mask merely cracked. Once, a foreman eyed me too closely, suspicion creeping into his gaze. "Where'd you say you're from again?" I forced a shrug. "Nowhere worth remembering." He chuckled, convinced. But later, alone in a bathroom, I gripped the sink, knuckles white, stomach twisting. One slip, one wrong word, and they'd write me off the ledger the same way they wrote off dead workers. That night, I slept with the rosary wound around my wrist, the crucifix digging into my skin, reminding me why I couldn't falter. Midway through the second year, Sophia introduced me to an AUSA who would later stand at my side in court. He was skeptical, flipping through my reports like a man expecting to find cracks. "You're too close," he said. "Family makes bad witnesses." I met his gaze, steady. Family makes the best witnesses when the crime is family itself. He didn't smile, but he stopped doubting the ink. By the third year, the case was airtight. Ledgers matched bank records. Payroll fraud tied back to shell companies. Betting slips stacked into a chronology too grotesque to dismiss. Still, there was a question hanging over it all. Would I testify? Or would my words stay sealed in reports and affidavits? The choice was mine, but I knew it was never really a choice. If I stayed sealed, the family could claim ghosts, lies, vendettas. If I stood, they'd have to look at me. Not as dropout, not as addict, not as too soft, but as the witness they couldn't silence. The night before I told Sophia, I sat in a safe house kitchen with the rosary coiled in my palm. My thumb found the worn groove where Grandma's nail had pressed for decades. I imagined her voice. "Don't let them take caring from you." I whispered back, "I won't." The next morning, I told Sophia, "I'll take the stand." She didn't praise me. She just nodded, as if she'd known all along this was where the path led. "Then we'll build you for cross," she said. Cross-examination was its own battlefield. We rehearsed in drab conference rooms under fluorescent lights, AUSAs playing, defense attorneys, firing questions meant to rattle me. "You hate your family, don't you?" "Yes." "You failed college?" "Yes." "You went to rehab?" "No." They lied. We practiced until the words lost their sting, until each answer was muscle memory. Sophia drilled into me. Stay inside the lines. Don't defend yourself, defend the truth. Every time I faltered, I saw Anthony's grin, Marcus's laughter, my mother's folded arms. I turned them into fuel. By the time the subpoenas landed on Anthony, Marcus, and my mother, the case was more than evidence. It was inevitable. I walked into court not as a ghost, not as a rumor, but as the blade they had forged in trying to bury me. And this time, the wound would speak. The court calls Deputy U.S. Marshal Elena Ward. The words cut through the hushed air like a blade. For a heartbeat, stillness. Then whispers broke loose, rippling across the benches. Deputy. Marshal. My name. My title. Not dropout. Not addict. Not the family shame. I rose. My knees trembled once, then locked steady. The badge at my hip caught the light. In my pocket, Grandma Rosa's rosary pressed its crucifix into my palm so hard it felt welded there. The aisle stretched long as I walked it, each step echoing against the marble floor. I passed rows of strangers, reporters, and, halfway back, faces I knew too well. My mother's eyes downcast, Anthony's glare like coals, Marcus smirking as if the game was already won. At the witness rail, the bailiff raised his hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. The oath settled on me like armor, weighty, binding, unbreakable. The prosecutor stood. His tone was calm, deliberate, but sharp enough to cut steel. State your name and occupation. Elena Ward. Deputy United States Marshal gasps rippled. My mother inhaled sharply, as if the air had betrayed her. Marcus's smirk faltered. Anthony snapped the pen in his hand, black ink spreading like a bruise across his palm. Deputy Ward, where were you from the years 21 through 24? Embedded in multiple construction sites owned by Ward & Sons Development. And your role? To gather evidence of organized racketeering, payroll fraud, and deliberate safety violations. And what did you find? I let the silence stretch before speaking. That my uncle and cousin placed bets on which workers would be injured or killed. The gallery erupted. Gasps, whispers, a muffled sob. The prosecutor slid a heavy binder onto the rail. Exhibit 14. Do you recognize this? I opened it. Plastic sleeves filled with slips of paper. Names, dates, odds scrawled like punchlines. Yes, these are betting slips. I collected them over 3 years from sites controlled by Ward & Sons. The prosecutor's voice dropped lower. Can you give the court examples? My throat tightened. The rosary beads dug deeper into my palm. Yes. Miguel Rojas. Harness snapped. Fell 3 stories. Luis Alvarez, 23 years old. Suffocated in a foundation pit with no ventilation. Teresa Morales, mother of 2, paralyzed when scaffolding collapsed. Their names were on these slips, their injuries, their deaths, treated as wagers. A ripple tore through the room. A woman's wail echoed from the second row. Someone clutched a framed photo to their chest. Murmurs rose. Monsters, gamblers, murderers. The judge's gavel cracked. Order! But the damage was done. The air had changed. Anthony shot to his feet, fist slamming the table. Lies! She's nothing but a dropout, an addict. She hated this family from the start. His attorney yanked his sleeve, whispering frantically, but Anthony's roar filled the room. My mother flinched, her lips parting. For a split second, it looked like she might object. Not that word, not my daughter. But she bit it back, eyes dropping to her folded hands. I leaned toward the microphone. My voice was clear, measured. Yes, I dropped out. Because in this family, truth was treason. But I am not an addict. I am a deputy U.S. Marshal. And I am here because Miguel cannot speak. Because Luis cannot breathe. Because Teresa cannot walk. The silence afterward was heavier than the gavel. The prosecutor let me speak at length. For an hour, I laid it there. The cracked hard hats tossed to workers, the cash envelopes handed out by labor brokers, the ledgers, doctored and signed, inspectors bribed with steak dinners and thicker envelopes. I described the day I found the bag of slips in a dumpster, my hands shaking as I spread them across a motel sink. The way I photographed them with trembling fingers, knowing one mistake could end me. I named others beyond Miguel, Luis, Teresa, Samuel Vega, crushed when scaffolding collapsed. His daughter sent me drawings she'd made of him in a hard hat. Josefina Reyes, burned when faulty wiring sparked. Her brother testified earlier that she'd begged for safer equipment. Each name was a weight I carried into that courtroom. Each name turned rumor into record. The defense attorney rose, his smile sharp as glass. Deputy Ward, you admit you hate your family? Yes. So this is vengeance. It's justice. Vengeance is secret. Justice is public. He paced. You failed out of college, did you not? Yes. You were unemployed for years? Yes. And during those years, your family claimed you were in rehab. They lied. I was in training with the United States Marshals. The gallery buzzed, journalists scribbling furiously. The attorney pressed harder. So, you admit bias. You admit failure. Why should this jury trust you? I clenched the rosary until the crucifix carved into skin. Because paper does not lie. Because signatures do not lie. Because truth does not depend on whether you like me. And because workers are dead. The attorney's jaw flexed. He tried again. You infiltrated sites under false pretenses. Isn't that deception? It's called undercover work. And deception to expose the truth is not the same as deception to bury it. The attorney turned to Marcus. Your cousin says you placed wagers. Did you? Marcus smirked, but it slipped. His collar dampened with sweat. His knee bounced under the table. She's twisting it. His voice cracked, too high. He swallowed, tried again. She's lying. But the mask was gone. The golden boy, the slick hair, the tailored suit, the heir apparent, was reduced to a boy sweating through cotton, whispering, "This isn't fair," under his breath, eyes darting like a trapped child. For years they had called him Prince. Now he was nothing but a boy who never earned the crown. The prosecutor held up ledgers. Deputy Ward, whose handwriting is this? Anthony Ward's. And these? Marcus Ward's. The jury leaned forward. Anthony shoved the papers away, but his hand trembled. For the first time, his mask cracked. Behind the fury burned something colder. Fear. Through it all, my mother sat stiff, clutching a handkerchief. When I spoke Teresa's name, her shoulders shook. Her lips trembled, almost forming words. Elena, I thought I heard her whisper. But she looked down again, eyes drowning in silence. Her refusal cut deeper than Anthony's roar or Marcus's collapse. The prosecutor returned. Deputy Ward, why testify yourself instead of letting reports speak? I inhaled. My voice trembled once, then steadied. Because for 23 years, my family called me weak. Because they told the world I was gone. Because the workers cannot speak. And because the only way to shatter silence is to stand in it. The gallery erupted. Sobs, prayers, murmurs. The judge hammered the gavel, but even he let the moment stretch. The prosecutor laid the last slip on the rail. Whose handwriting? Anthony Ward's. And this? Marcus Ward's. The defense attorney sank into his chair. The jury stared, stone-faced. No further questions. Witness dismissed. I stood. My legs trembled from hours of testimony, but they held. The aisle stretched forever. As I passed the defense table, Anthony glared, fury curdled with fear. Marcus hunched, lips moving, whispering to no one. My mother lifted her head, tears streaking her cheeks. Her lips trembled. Elena. Her voice cracked on my name, soft, aching, like when I was a child sobbing over a scraped knee. For a breath, my chest caved. My legs screamed to stop. But I clenched the rosary so hard the crucifix cut skin. Silence had cost too much already. I walked on, heartbreaking, but unbroken. The gavel struck once, twice, 3 times. Each crack echoed like falling bricks from a condemned wall. The judge's voice was steady, but every word landed like iron. Anthony Ward, 23 years for racketeering, 15 years for fraud, 5 years for conspiracy. Sentences to run consecutively. Anthony's jaw clenched. His lips pressed tight, but his knuckles trembled on the table. For decades, he had stood as if the empire itself leaned on his shoulders. Now he looked like a man beneath rubble, struggling for air. Marcus Ward, 12 years for fraud, 5 for conspiracy, 3 for endangerment. Marcus's knee bounced uncontrollably. His mouth opened, but no words came. The boy who had been promised a kingdom was left speechless, stripped of crown and throne. Margaret Ward, 3 years, suspended sentence for obstruction of justice. My mother gasped softly, the sound no louder than a prayer. Her face collapsed, not rage, not pride, but grief, twisted and raw. The courtroom erupted, sobs, whispers, flashes from reporters. Some cried, some clapped, some sat frozen, as if justice itself had stunned them. The hall outside was chaos. Microphones thrust like spears, flashes sparking like lightning. Reporters' voices collided. Deputy Ward, do you feel vindicated? Was this revenge? Do you regret testifying against your own family? I didn't break stride. My words were few, but heavy. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is remembering the lives they tried to forget. The crowd surged, but I walked through it. Rosary clutched so tightly the beads marked my skin, my badge gleaming with each camera flash. Through the glass doors, marshals led my family away. Anthony's face was stone, but his eyes betrayed fear. For once, his glare carried no power. Marcus stumbled as they pushed him forward, lips still mouthing, "This isn't fair." The Prince of Ward and Sons reduced to a child begging for a do-over. Then my mother appeared, not in cuffs, but shadowed by attorneys. She stopped. For the first time in decades, her eyes sought mine. Her lips parted. Elena. Just my name. Just that. It cracked through me like glass breaking inside my chest. I remembered that same voice over me at 5 years old, whispering comfort as she cleaned a scraped knee. I remembered her calling me inside when thunderstorms split the sky. For half a breath, I almost reached back. Almost. But then I felt the crucifix in my palm, sharp and unyielding. Silence had already cost too much. I walked on. My heart broke, but my step did not falter. A week later, I stood in the Union Hall. The air smelled of burnt coffee and paper, but the walls were alive with photos, faces of the lost. Miguel, Luis, Teresa, Samuel, Josefina. Dozens more. The families filled the seats. Mothers clutched children. Fathers clutched folded caps. Silence hung heavy, expectant. I stepped to the podium. My voice did not need to rise. The silence carried it for me. The wards treated lives as expendable. They placed bets on who would not come home. But today, the record says otherwise. Miguel, Luis, Teresa, Samuel, Josefina. Their names live in testimony. Their dignity is restored, and their families will be compensated. A widow pressed her daughter's hand into mine. The child stared up, wide-eyed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you." An older man came forward, his hands calloused, skin weathered by decades of labor. He placed a folded photograph into my hand. His son's face stared out. "They took him from me," he said, voice breaking. "But you gave him back his honor." I tucked the photo into my jacket. Another weight, another truth. Later, I went alone to Grandma Rosa's grave. The cemetery was still, the air heavy with dusk. The sky burned crimson, the same color as the scarf she always wore. I knelt, pressing the rosary to the headstone. The crucifix was warm from my hand, as if carrying her presence. "I did what you asked," I whispered. I cared too much. The wind stirred, rustling dry leaves. It sounded like a prayer in her voice. For the first time, the wound didn't ache like emptiness. It pulsed like a scar that had closed. Before leaving Riverside, I stopped at a makeshift memorial outside one of the shuttered job sites. Wooden crosses, hard hats nailed to poles. Candles burned low, wax pooled in the dirt. Families had left notes, flowers, children's drawings of fathers in helmets. I placed the rosary on a brick for a moment, letting it catch the last light of the sun. Then I looped it back around my wrist. Family wasn't the wards anymore. Family was here, in the widow's tears, in the children's eyes, in every name carved into this memorial. The press said I destroyed my family. They were wrong. My family destroyed itself. I only pulled back the curtain. I was never just a dropout, never an addict, never too soft. I was exactly what they feared most, someone who cared enough to break free, and strong enough to return, not as their scapegoat, but as their reckoning. And when the gavel fell, I knew. The legacy I carried was not theirs. It was mine. If you believe true strength is proving yourself through action, not words, subscribe for more stories of courage and justice.